This happened last summer when I was hiking solo in Colorado. I'd been planning this trip for weeks. A couple of days in the mountains, just me, my gear, and the trail. I wanted peace and quiet, time to clear my head. The first day went perfectly. The sun was hot but not unbearable, and there was this constant mountain breeze that kept me cool. The air smelled like pine and wildflowers, and the only sounds were birds overhead and the crunch of my boots on the dirt path. It felt like I was the only person in the world. By late afternoon, I was making my way up a ridge. The trail got narrower there, with steep drops on both sides. It was the kind of path that forces you to pay attention. One wrong step, and you're sliding down 100 feet into rocks. That's when I noticed him. At the far end of the ridge, standing completely still, was a man. I stopped in my tracks, my first thought being that maybe he was another hiker. But something about him immediately felt off. For one thing, he wasn't dressed for hiking. No backpack, no hat, no water bottle, just jeans and a flannel shirt. His clothes looked out of place up there like he had just wandered out of a diner and into the mountains. He didn't move as I approached, didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't even shift his weight. He just stood there, staring in my direction. I slowed down, suddenly unsure. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that maybe he was just resting, maybe even waiting for someone behind me, but the longer I looked at him, the stranger it seemed. His posture was too rigid, like he was frozen in place. I called out, just a simple, "Hey, how's it going?" But he didn't answer. The air felt heavier then, still. My heartbeat started to climb. I took a cautious step forward, gripping my trekking pole tighter. That's when he did something that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. Without a sound, he turned and walked straight off the ridge, not down a side trail, not toward a ledge, just off the edge. I froze, my brain trying to process what I had just seen. I sprinted forward, adrenaline surging, convinced I'd just watched a man fall to his death. When I got to the spot where he had been standing, I braced myself for the worst, but there was nothing. I edged closer, carefully peering over the side. The slope dropped steeply into a mess of rocks and trees. If he had fallen, there's no way he would have gotten up again. I scanned the ground below for any sign of movement, any flash of clothing. Nothing. No body, no sound, no broken branches, just empty forest. I stood there, shaking, trying to make sense of it. Did I hallucinate? Was it some kind of shadow or trick of the light? But I knew what I saw. A man, standing there, and then walking off into nothing. The worst part? As I backed away from the ledge, I glanced down at the dirt where he had been standing. There were no footprints, just undisturbed ground, like no one had ever stood there at all. I finished that hike, but I'll be honest. I rushed the rest of the trail, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every time the wind shifted, I thought I heard footsteps behind me. Even now, I can't explain it. And whenever people ask me why I don't hike alone anymore, I tell them about the man on the ridge, the one who wasn't really there. This happened a few years ago when my friends and I decided to tackle a section of the Appalachian Trail. We weren't hardcore hikers by any means, but we were all in decent shape, and we thought a 3-day trek would be fun, challenging, but not impossible. The trail itself was beautiful, rolling hills, endless trees, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. During the day, we'd pass other hikers here and there, but as night came, the woods grew quieter. Most nights we'd just pitch our tents off the trail, but on the second night, We stumbled across one of those rustic wooden shelters built for hikers. It was a simple structure: three walls, a roof, a raised wooden floor. Nothing fancy, but it meant we wouldn't have to set up our tents. We dropped our packs, cooked some food, and sat around talking until the sun disappeared behind the trees. That night, the woods felt different. Still, too still. The usual hum of insects and rustling branches had died down. I remember lying on the wooden floor of the shelter, listening, waiting for the forest to come alive again. Sometime past midnight, I woke up. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I realized I was hearing it for real. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps pacing outside the shelter. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. The sound circled the shelter, slowly, crunching over leaves and sticks, pausing every so often, as if whoever it was listening for us. At first, I thought it had to be an animal, a deer maybe, but then I heard it, humming, low, tuneless, human humming. Every hair on my body stood on end. I sat there, clutching my sleeping bag, staring at the opening of the shelter. The footsteps kept circling, closer, then farther away, sometimes stopping directly at the entrance, just out of sight. I glanced at my friends, but they were still asleep. I thought about waking them, but part of me didn't want to move, didn't want to make a sound. The humming went on for what felt like hours. Sometimes it would fade, like the person was walking deeper into the woods, only to return moments later, over and over again. When the first light of dawn finally crept into the trees, the sound was gone. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, my nerves frayed. My friends stirred awake, completely unaware of what I had heard all night. I stepped outside, my stomach in knots, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. Dozens of them. Heavy boot prints in the dirt, circling the shelter again and again. I never told my friends what happened. I just packed up and kept walking. But every time I think about hiking the Appalachian Trail again, I remember that night, the humming, the footsteps, and the man who never stepped inside. This was about 4 years ago in Oregon. My cousin and I had taken a day off work to do a long hike. Nothing extreme, just a loop trail through some dense forest, the kind where the trees grow so thick that sunlight barely reaches the ground. A few miles in, we noticed something strange. One of the trees had a rope tied around it, not like a swing or a marker. This was thick rope, frayed but strong, tied tight around the trunk. We laughed at first, figuring it was some weird hiker thing, until we noticed another one, then another. trees tied to each other bent at odd angles, almost like someone had been weaving with the forest itself. Curiosity got the better of us. We followed the ropes, weaving between trees, deeper and deeper into the woods. The air grew cooler, quieter, as if even the birds didn't want to be there. That's when we stepped into a clearing. At the center was a single wooden chair, old, splintered, facing away from us. We stood there, staring, trying to figure out what we were looking at. The ropes ended at the clearing, as if they all led to this one spot. Then we heard it, a sharp snap, like someone stepping on a branch, then another, closer. We didn't wait to find out who or what was coming. We bolted, crashing through the trees, abandoning the trail entirely until we found our way back by sheer luck. When we finally caught our breath, we looked at each other and agreed never to speak about it again. I've hiked that same area since, but I've never found the tied trees again. Part of me wonders if it was some strange art project. Another part wonders if it was something else entirely. One summer, I decided to hike in Utah. The trail I picked was popular, well marked, and I figured it would be a good way to spend the day. But at one point, I saw a narrow path veering off into the woods. It looked worn, like others had used it before, and I thought maybe it was a shortcut. Big mistake. At first, it seemed fine. The dirt was packed down, the trees spaced just enough to see ahead. But the deeper I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects, just silence. That's when I noticed the trees. They weren't normal. They had marks carved into them, deep scratches like tally marks, over and over again, as if someone had been keeping count. I turned to head back, uneasy. But after a few minutes, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The path behind me wasn't the same. The trees were different. The markings were gone. I walked faster, then broke into a jog. My breathing echoed in the silence, my footsteps crunching on dirt that suddenly felt unfamiliar. I don't know how long I wandered. Time blurred. The forest felt endless, twisting in on itself. Just when I thought I was completely lost, I stumbled back onto the main trail, almost collapsing from relief. I told myself I must have been disoriented, maybe panicked and confused. But deep down, I know what I felt. That shortcut wasn't meant to be found. A few summers ago, I went on a 2-day hike in Montana. The first day went well. I made camp by a stream, cooked a simple dinner, and settled into my tent as the sun set. The forest at night was alive with sound: crickets, frogs, the occasional rustle in the underbrush. It was comforting in a way, natural. Sometime after midnight, though, I woke up, not from a noise, but from silence, the kind of heavy silence that presses against your ears. And then I heard it, whispering. At first I thought I was imagining it, but the more I listened, the clearer it became. Low, urgent muttering right outside my tent. My body went cold. I held my breath, straining to make out the words, but they weren't in English. They weren't like any language I'd ever heard. Then came the shadow, a hand, pressing against the thin fabric of the tent, slowly dragging along the side, tracing the outline of where I was lying. I grabbed the knife from my pack and shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The whispering stopped instantly. I sat there in silence for what felt like forever before finally unzipping the tent. No one, but in the dirt around me I saw them, footprints, a perfect circle of them, surrounding my tent, over and over, as if someone had walked in circles around me all night. I packed up at dawn and didn't look back.